My father's text was short. Thanksgiving is full. Next year, 8 words to be uninvited from my own family. I texted back, okay. Then I looked out at my $5 million ranch and ordered 200 chairs. That night, I lit up the entire Starlight Basin Hall. If their table was full, I would build one for everyone who never had a place. My name is Lauren. The text message arrived at 8:03 a.m., the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was in my condo in Ashridge, Colorado, a place that mostly served as a high-altitude charging station between board meetings. The coffee in my mug was cold. The air outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was thin and sharp. My phone did not ring. It just buzzed once on the granite countertop, a short, sterile vibration. I picked it up. It was from my father. 8 words. Thanksgiving is full. Next year. Full, not, we're tight on space, or, it's chaotic here, honey, just, full, as if I were trying to book a popular restaurant and not asking to come home. I stared at the message, the blue bubble glowing in the morning light. My fingers hovered. I could dissect it. I could ask what he meant. I could demand to know who was coming. I could rage. Instead, I typed 2 words, okay. Then I pressed the Do Not Disturb icon on his contact thread. The silence that followed was louder than the buzz had been. I walked away from the phone. My condo felt small, sterile. I went to my desk and pulled up the live feed from the ranch. Starlight Basin, my ranch, my $5 million sanctuary in White Hollow, Montana. I bought it 6 months ago, the first major purchase after the Hearthway Logistics partial acquisition. It was not a vanity project. It was an escape hatch. The cameras showed the main lodge, Starlight Basin Hall, under a fresh 6 inches of snow. The pines were heavy with it. The air there, I knew, would smell like wood smoke and ice. Even on the screen, it looked vast. It looked empty. It looked like the opposite of full. Full was a familiar feeling. It was the defining architecture of my childhood. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Sunday dinner, the main table, a heavy, dark mahogany heirloom, was reserved for the real family. My parents, my older sister Marin, my aunts, my uncles, the important guests, and then, set up in the doorway between the dining room and the kitchen, was the card table. That flimsy, metal-legged, vinyl-topped square was my seat, from age 6 to age 18. I was always the overflow. I sat there with a view of the kitchen steam and the sound of the dishwasher, close enough to hear the laughter from the main table, but never close enough to be part of the joke. I ate quickly. My knees jammed against the metal crossbar. I was the designated runner for more butter, more wine, more napkins. The card table was a physical manifestation of my status, present, but not included. I stared at the image of the Starlight Basin Hall. It was built to host weddings, corporate retreats. The great room alone could seat 300. It had a commercial-grade kitchen, 2 massive stone fireplaces, and views of the entire valley. When I bought the place, I made one rule for the staff, for myself, for the very bones of the building. No card tables, ever. At Starlight Basin, everyone gets a real seat. Everyone is equal. My company, Hearthway Logistics, was built on that principle. We did not build it to be glamorous. We built it because people were dying. We built a cold chain optimization platform that ensures temperature-sensitive supplies, vaccines, medications, fresh food. Get through the last mile in rural and mountain regions. We fixed broken links. We filled the gaps where the big carriers failed. We specialized in getting things where they were supposed to be, when they were supposed to be there. We succeeded by refusing to accept that some places were full or too hard to reach. The anger finally hit me. It was not a hot, screaming rage. It was cold, clear, and sharp, like the Montana air, full. They were turning me away from a 14-seat table. Fine. I looked at the empty, snow-covered hall on my screen. I felt the ghost of the card table at my back. If they will not give me a seat, I will build an entire row of them. I will build 200. I picked up my phone, not to call my family, but to call my assistant, Maya, who was already in Montana prepping the ranch for my arrival on Friday. She answered on the first ring. "Lauren, everything okay? Your flight is not until—" "Change of plans. Maya, we're hosting Thanksgiving. Tomorrow." Silence. Then, "Tomorrow. As in 24 hours? For how many?" 200, I said. Another beat of silence. Maya was used to my logistics brain. 200. Okay. What is the mission? The mission is open table. I want you to call Sheriff Collins in White Hollow. Tell him we're expecting a crowd and need coordination for parking and road safety, especially if the snow picks up. Then, call Pastor Ruth at the White Hollow Church. Call the rural clinic. Call the VFW post. Tell them Starlight Basin Ranch is hosting Thanksgiving for anyone without a place to go. Anyone who is alone, working a shift, or just wants a hot meal. No questions asked. Got it. Collins, Ruth, clinic, VFW. Next, I said, pulling up my supplier lists. I need equipment. I am placing the order now, but you need to coordinate the drop-off. 10 industrial smokers. We are not trying to roast 200 pounds of turkey in the main ovens. Get the barbecue pits fired up. I want 3 extra generators, the big ones, and all the fuel reserves we can legally store. I want the entire drive, from the gate to the hall, lined with string lights. It needs to look like a beacon. I was pacing now. The Ashridge condo forgotten. I was already in Montana, smelling the smoke and the pine. And Maya? That old wooden sign by the workshop? The one the previous owners left? I want you to get Tom from maintenance to carve something into it. Tonight, I want it hanging over the main fireplace when the doors open. It needs to say, "For the one who felt unseen." "Lauren," Maya said, her voice careful. "That is clear. What about food?" "I am wiring the funds now. Buy out the local food hub, potatoes, carrots, pumpkins, butter, all of it. Our goal is 200 full meals, hot plates, real cutlery, no one eats off paper, and no one is turned away at the door, not if the hall is half empty, and not if we are overflowing." I hung up and stared at the empty text message thread from my father. Thanksgiving is full. A thought solidified, cold and hard. My parents' house has 14 chairs at that mahogany table. 14. Even with my sister Marin and her husband, and my brother Cal, that left 8 empty seats. So who was filling them? Who was so important that the full sign went up for their own daughter? The math did not work. The excuse was lazy. It was a lie wrapped in an inconvenience. I booked a last-minute charter flight from Ashridge to Bozeman. I would be on the ground in 3 hours. I packed a bag, not formal wear. I packed work boots, fleece-lined jeans, and my Hearthway radio headset. I sent one last text to Maya. Set a 24-hour countdown clock on the main website. Starlight Basin open table. Doors open tomorrow at 4 p.m. I zipped my bag. The silence in the condo was gone. In my head, I could hear the generators humming, the sound of saws, the sizzle of butter in a pan. They wanted a full table. I would give them a full house. The jet was small, fast, and aggressively quiet. The climb out of Ashridge was a silent, vertical pull. Below me, the Colorado landscape was a geometry of browns and whites. I was the only passenger. The leather seat was cold, and the cabin smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant. It was the exact opposite of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving smelled like thyme, boiling onions, and a specific, cloying perfume my Aunt Clara wore. This sterile quiet, this pressurized ascent, was what I usually craved. Today, it just gave my memories too much room to breathe. Full, my father's word echoed in the 60,000-foot silence. I closed my eyes, and I was 14. It was the first thing I had ever baked entirely on my own. A pumpkin pie. I had saved my allowance for 3 weeks to buy real vanilla extract and a ceramic pie dish instead of using the aluminum foil pans. I followed the recipe exactly. I crimped the crust until my fingers ached. The house was hot and loud, filled with the noise of a football game on television and my relatives shouting over it. I remember the smell of the cinnamon and nutmeg, how it cut through the heavier scent of the roasting turkey. I was proud. I carried it out of the kitchen, holding the hot dish with two mismatched oven mitts. I set it on the sideboard. I made the pumpkin pie, I announced. My voice was too small. My mother, rushing past with a tray of glasses, did not even look at it. "Oh, honey, that's nice. Just move it to the back. We need room for your aunt's desserts." "But I made this one for Lauren, please. Your aunt needs to taste it first. Make sure it's—" She waved a hand, searching for a word. "Right, Marin, sweetheart, did you show everyone your homecoming sash?" Marin, my sister, was standing by the fireplace, glowing. She was always the center of the light, homecoming queen, debate team captain, the bright future of the Vale family. The praise in that house flowed to her like a river. My pie, with its carefully crimped crust, was pushed behind a store-bought pecan log. Later that night, I found it on the card table in the hallway, untouched, with a stack of dirty napkins resting on its surface. That was the year I stopped trying to bake. It was the year I perfected the art of invisibility. I learned to anticipate the flow of the room. I learned to clear plates before anyone had to ask. I knew who needed a refill on their wine, who was looking for the remote, who was about to tell a story they had already told. I learned to smile at the right time and disappear at the right time. I became the ghost that kept the machinery of the party running. I was the support system, the logistics coordinator for a family that never saw the operator. My achievements were quiet. They did not hang on a wall. When I was 16, I spent 6 months writing a program that optimized the bus routes for our school district. It was a complex piece of code that saved the district thousands of dollars in fuel and shaved 15 minutes off the longest routes. I was proud of it. I found my father in his study, showed him the lines of code, the simulated map. He nodded, looking at the screen with a vague, polite interest. That's clever. Lauren, very practical." He cleared his throat. "Did you see Marin's debate trophy? They took first in the state regionals. She's just a natural." He turned away from my laptop, his focus already shifted, pulled into the orbit of his brighter child. I closed the laptop. That was the day I learned the most important lesson, the one that built my company. Machines are better than people. A broken wire can be soldered, a bad line of code can be debugged and rewritten, a system that fails can be analyzed, broken down, and rebuilt stronger. A family just breaks. The wires stay frayed. The code stays rotten. You cannot fix it. You can only build something new, somewhere else. When I got the full scholarship to Summit West, a top-tier engineering program clear across the country, I thought I was finally free. I presented the acceptance letter at dinner. My mother smiled, a tight, anxious expression. "Oh, Lauren, that's so far and so expensive." "It's a full ride, Mom. It covers everything." My father set down his fork. "We've been talking," he said, and my stomach went cold. "We think it would be better if you stayed closer. Look at the community college. It's practical. You could help your mother. Be here for the holidays. It's just more convenient for the family." Convenient, like the card table, like the back of the sideboard. I looked at Marin. She was looking at her plate, silent. She would be going to an Ivy League school that fall, an expense they had been planning for since her birth. I did not argue. I did not yell. I just nodded, smiled at the right time, and cleared the plates. 2 weeks later, I packed one duffel bag, emptied my savings account, $412, and bought a one-way bus ticket. I did not leave a note. I supported myself. I waited tables at a 24-hour diner that smelled of stale coffee and industrial grease. I took internships that paid nothing but gave me access to server rooms. I slept on floors. I was hungry. I was cold. But I was not unseen. I was just anonymous. It was a relief. The idea for Hearthway Logistics came from failure, not mine, but someone else's. I was interning at a rural health consortium, managing their data, A shipment of pediatric vaccines, critical for a remote clinic in the Rockies, was lost in transit. It was not lost for a week. It was delayed by 90 minutes. 90 minutes in a non-refrigerated truck on a hot tarmac. The entire batch, worth over $50,000, was useless. 90 minutes, a broken link in the cold chain. I saw the system. I saw the gap. I saw the children who would have to wait. The risk. The catastrophic waste. I found Mateo Cruz in a university coding forum. He was a systems architect who thought in algorithms. I found June Park in the operations department of a failing grocery distributor. She knew shipping lanes the way a river pilot knows the currents. We were 3 people in a garage bay behind a laundromat in Denver. We were not a Silicon Valley startup. We were cold, desperate, and fueled by bad pizza and the smell of dryer sheets. We were trying to fix something that was actually fixable. We built a platform that did not just track a package, it monitored temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure in real time. It used predictive analytics to reroute shipments around weather, traffic, or system failures. We were the neural network of the mountains. Then, the pandemic hit. Suddenly, the world understood what a broken supply chain meant. Cold chain logistics were not boring. They were the difference between life and death. Hearthway did not just grow. It exploded. Our platform became the essential infrastructure for getting vaccines and medical supplies into the very rural, hard-to-reach places the big carriers deemed inconvenient. The acquisition offer came last year. We did not sell the whole company. We sold a controlling interest, a strategic partnership. The payday was massive, but I kept 2 things: a seat on the board and sole control of the Hearthway Rural Community Fund. I bought Starlight Basin Ranch with the first wire transfer. The $5 million price tag was a headline, but it was not the point. I did not buy it to host lavish parties or to finally impress the family that never saw me. I bought it for the quiet. I bought it because the valley is surrounded by 10,000-foot peaks, a natural fortress against the world. I bought it for the silence, for the snow, for the absolute, undeniable space. The jet's engines whined as we began our descent into Bozeman. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed. I looked out the window at the endless white of the Montana landscape. I bought Starlight Basin for peace, but peace, I was learning, is not the same as surrender. My family thought I was the overflow. They thought I was the card table, the convenient add-on, the one they could dismiss with 8 words. They had no idea what I had been building in the cold. The tires of the 4x4 crunched on the freshly plowed gravel of the ranch road. I had not slept. The flight from Ashridge to Bozeman was just a pressurized tube of recycled air and simmering rage. The drive to White Hollow was a 2-hour battle against gathering snow clouds, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. It was 10 p.m., Wednesday night. 22 hours until Thanksgiving. The Starlight Basin Hall was lit up, just as I had ordered. It looked like a beacon in the vast, snowy dark. Maya met me at the door, a thermal mug of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. "Generators 1 and 2 are online," she said. Skipping the greeting, she was Hearthway trained. "The kitchen is hot. The 10 smokers are being delivered to the stable yard. They're heavy-duty, commercial grade." "Good. Where are we on food?" "That's the problem. The local food hub is closed for the holiday. Their manager, a guy named Henderson, said he can't open the warehouses without authorization until Friday." "Get Henderson on the phone," I said, shrugging off my coat. "Get me Sheriff Collins. Get me Pastor Ruth. Get me the VFW. I want a 4-way call. Now." I walked into the great hall. Tom, the ranch foreman, was already there with his 2 sons, unboxing string lights. The massive fireplace was cold. "Tom," I called out, pulling on my headset. "I need that sign carved. For the one who felt unseen. I want it mounted above the mantel before sunrise. Can you do it?" He nodded, a slow, respectful gesture. "Already got the wood curing, boss. My daughter's tracing the letters." Maya handed me the phone. "They're all on Collins, Pastor Ruth, and Henderson from the hub." I hit the button. Gentlemen, Pastor, this is Lauren Vale at Starlight Basin. I'll be brief. I'm hosting an open Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow for anyone in the valley who doesn't have a place to go. My goal is 200 meals. I have two problems: people and food. Sheriff Collins spoke first, his voice gravelly. Ms. Vale, I appreciate the sentiment, but a storm front is moving in. You're asking for 200 people to drive up that canyon road in a potential whiteout. I can't endorse it. That's why I'm calling you. Sheriff, I'm not asking them to drive. I'm organizing a shuttle. I need 2 of your deputies to coordinate pickups from the Route 27 park and ride. My ranch trucks will handle the canyon road, in convoy. We're running heated cables along the main walkway right now. I'm not asking for endorsement. I'm asking for coordination. There was a pause. That's a logistic. All right, I can spare 2 deputies for traffic control at 27. Pastor Ruth? Her voice was warm, but skeptical. Lauren, this is a beautiful idea. But how do we reach these people? The ones who feel unseen are not usually checking their email. That's why I need you. Pastor, I need the church's telephone tree. I need the community broadcast. I need you to make the announcement. Tell them it's safe, it's warm, and it's free. Tell them the shuttles start at 3 p.m. I can do that, she said, the skepticism fading. I will call the clinic and the VFW post myself. Henderson, I said. The food hub. I need potatoes. I need every turkey you have left, frozen or fresh. I need carrots, onions, flour, butter, and pumpkins. And I need your largest mobile cold storage unit delivered to my kitchen bay by 6 a.m. Ma'am, I told your assistant, I'm locked down for the holiday. Mr. Henderson, my company is Hearthway Logistics. We manage the cold chain for half the medical suppliers in this state. I know for a fact your mobile unit is sitting idle, and I know you have 500 pounds of potatoes and a dozen cases of frozen turkeys in Bay 3. I'm not asking for a donation. I am placing a purchase order, a very, very large one. If you can't unlock the door, I will call your regional director and explain that you are refusing emergency supplies. Or, you can meet my team in 1 hour, get paid triple time, and be the man who saved Thanksgiving. The silence on the line stretched. I'll be there in 45 minutes, Henderson said. The clock was ticking. The culinary heist was in motion. By midnight, the ranch was no longer a quiet refuge. It was a military-grade staging ground. The 10 smokers were lined up in the stable yard, shielded from the wind. Trucks arrived with propane tanks. Then, the volunteers started to show. First was Margaret Shaw. She was a retired chef from the best restaurant in Bozeman. A woman in her 70s with hands scarred by a lifetime of cooking. Pastor Ruth had called her. She walked into the kitchen, tied on an apron, and said, "Right, who's on vegetables?" Then came Elena, a nursing student from the clinic, who quietly began setting up a small first aid station by the door. In case of falls on the ice, she explained, Tom's wife, Maria, arrived with 3 other women from the church, and they immediately took over the baking. They found the convection ovens and started mixing dough for pie crusts. Tom and his sons, having finished mounting the heavy wooden sign, started organizing the tables. No card tables, I told him, walking the floor. Only the long-haul tables. Everyone sits together. I put my headset on and tapped the comms link. All right, team, this is Kitchen Command. Let's zone this. I grabbed a large whiteboard. This is a logistics problem. We have 200 targets. Let's break it down. Zone 1, protein, the stable yard. Tom, you're in charge of the smokers. We have 8 massive turkeys. I want them brined and smoking by 4 a.m. The other 2 smokers are for the hams. Zone 2, prep. I pointed to Margaret. This is your kitchen. I need 500 pounds of potatoes peeled, boiled, and mashed. I want vats of gravy. I want stuffing. I want the carrots and the beans. Zone 3, baking. I looked at Maria. 50 pies, pumpkin, apple, pecan, no shortcuts, and cornbread, lots of it. Zone 4, dietary. I drew a separate box on the board. This is zero tolerance. I need a dedicated prep station for gluten-free, another for vegan, and a clear labeled nut-free buffer. Elena, I need you to supervise this. Cross-contamination is our enemy. Every plate that leaves this station must be 100% safe. Zone 5. The floor. I looked at Maya. You manage the flow of people. The shuttles will arrive every 20 minutes. We need greeters. We need servers. This is not a buffet. We serve them, like family. The energy planning was next. The snow is getting heavier, I said, pointing to the dark windows. The grid is going to fail. It always does. I switched my headset to the engineering channel. Tom, I want all 3 generators running in parallel by noon, not on standby, running. I want a full 48 hours of fuel in the reserve tanks. The heated cables on the walkway must be operational at all times. If the storm hits peak, I want the ranch plows ready to lead the shuttles up from Route 27. We don't wait for Collins. We clear our own path. The night blurred. I was back in the garage with Mateo and June, high on caffeine and desperation. I peeled potatoes alongside Margaret. I checked fuel gauges with Tom. I tasted gravy. I signed invoices for staggering amounts of butter. At 6 a.m., the sun came up, pale and weak through the heavy snow. The smell was magnificent. Wood smoke, cinnamon, roasting garlic. I walked back into the great hall. It was transformed. 2 long, beautiful wooden tables stretched the length of the room. Set for 200, the fireplace roared. Above it, Tom's carving was perfect. For the one who felt unseen, I took a huge, empty wicker basket and filled it with new wool hats and thick thermal socks I had ordered. I placed a small sign on it. Please take a pair. Near the entrance, I set up a massive, old-fashioned blackboard on an easel. The header, in white chalk, read, "What are you grateful for?" Stacks of chalk lay waiting. Finally, I went to the main fireplace. I took one of the heavy oak dining chairs. I moved it away from the table, setting it by itself, angled toward the flames. It was the best seat in the house, close to the fire, warm, quiet. I left it empty. This was the unseen chair. It was the seat for the person who was always relegated to the card table. It was for the person who was told the table was full. It was a silent testament, a space held in reserve. It was my space. Maya, I said into my headset. 3 p.m. We are on schedule. Open the gates. I looked up. The overhead cameras I had installed for security were blinking. I had Maya patch the main feed from the Great Hall to a private server. No sound, no narration, just the high-angle, logistical view. The clock ticked. I was kitchen command. I grabbed a clean apron. All right, team, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. We are live. Let's feed some people. It was noon, Thanksgiving Day. The ranch was a humming, operational miracle. 12 hours since I had landed, and 4 hours until the gates opened. The Great Hall was a wall of heat and scent. It smelled like safety. It smelled like wood smoke, roasted sage, and the deep, nutty aroma of browning butter. The 10 smokers in the stable yard were all running hot, puffing fragrant clouds into the falling snow. The generators were a low, steady thrum beneath my feet, a vibration of pure power. Everything was in its place. Every volunteer had a station. We were a machine, primed and ready. But the text message still sat in my mind like a piece of grit in an engine. Full. The lie was inefficient. It was sloppy. 14 seats. It did not compute. I had built my life on analyzing systems, and this system was flawed. I needed the data. I wiped my hands on the clean apron I had just tied on, pulled off my communications headset, and walked into my office. It was the only quiet place in the building. I closed the heavy oak door, and the warm, bustling sound of the hall was instantly muffled, replaced by the high, thin whistle of the wind against the double-paned glass. I pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over my father's name. No, he would only give me the approved statement. Not Mom. She would just cry. Not Marin. She would be hostile. I scrolled down and pressed the name. Cal. My younger brother, the one who still lived at home, the one who existed in the shadows. Much as I had, he always answered. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was a frantic whisper. Lauren? Hey. Oh, man. Happy Thanksgiving. Are you okay? The fact that he had to ask told me everything. Hey, Cal? My voice was flat, colder than I intended. I'm fine. I just have one question for you. Look, Lauren, I can't really talk. I heard it in the background. The noise he was trying to hide. It was not the quiet dinner he was implying. It was laughter, loud, bright. I heard music. I heard the unmistakable, booming laugh of my Aunt Clara. Cal, just answer me. Is there really no party today? A long, heavy silence stretched down the line. I could picture him, huddled in the pantry or the downstairs bathroom, shoulder jammed against the door. Cal? He sighed, a rush of defeated air. Look, it's complicated. Lauren, it is a yes or no question. Did Dad lie to me? Is the table full? No. I mean, yes, the table is full, but they're still having dinner. Of course they are. My stomach, which had been tight with adrenaline and purpose, turned to ice. What does that mean, Cal? Still having dinner. It's just smaller this year. He stammered, the lie clumsy and thin. It's just for Marin, her and a few of her friends. Her husband's senior partners from the law firm are in town. And senior partners, not family, strangers. So I was uninvited, I stated. It was not a question. For Marin's networking opportunity, it's not like that. Lauren, it's important. Dad and Mom are trying to help her husband's career. You know how it is? No. Cal, I don't. How many people are there? What? I don't know. How many? Cal, how many people are at the small dinner? He hesitated. Like, maybe 20? Her friends, the partners, us, they brought in another table. They had expanded. They had found more chairs. They just had not found one for me. The card table, it seemed, had been permanently retired. One last question. Is Aunt June there? Aunt June, my mother's sister, the family black sheep, the one who had always slipped me a $20 bill and told me to get out of town. Cal's voice dropped even lower. No, she and Mom, they had a huge fight, last week, about you. Actually, Aunt June said what they were doing was cruel. Mom told her if she didn't like how this family was run, she could stay home, too. So, the purge was intentional. It was not just me I was not convenient. It was anyone who questioned the narrative. Anyone who was not aligned with Marin's bright, shiny future. The ice in my stomach did not melt. It hardened. It solidified into ballast. It was not hurt anymore. It was clarity. It was focus. Lauren, are you still there? Please don't be mad. It's really not a big deal. They're just... Thank you for being honest. Cal, I said. My voice was perfectly calm. It surprised even me. Wait, Lauren, don't... I ended the call. I stood in the silent office for a full minute. The wind howled. I looked at the phone in my hand. He hadn't just lied. He had used a lazy, inefficient lie designed to make me feel like an inconvenience, an overflow problem. The truth was so much worse, and so much better. I was not an oversight. I was a choice. I was a threat. I had spent a decade. I had built an entire company. I had earned millions of dollars, all in a subconscious effort to finally be worthy of a seat at that mahogany table. I opened the office door. The wall of heat, light, and noise hit me like a physical force. Margaret Shaw, the retired chef, was conducting her prep team, her voice sharp and joyful. More butter in the potatoes. Do not be shy. Tom's sons were stacking firewood, their faces flushed from the heat. Elena was meticulously labeling containers of vegan gravy. This was my table. It was not a table built on obligation, lies, and strategic exclusions. It was a table built in 22 hours on shared purpose and absolute necessity. My focus, which had been split between the past I was trying to fix and the present I was trying to build, snapped into one. The wound was cauterized. The doubt was gone. I walked over to the massive blackboard at the entrance, the one with the header, Bon Biet un Duzi. I picked up a piece of chalk. Underneath the main question, I wrote in big, clear, logistical letters, Open table, 200 meals, no questions asked. As if the chalk were a summons. My headset crackled to life. It was Maya. Lauren, you need to hear this. I tapped my earpiece. Go. The National Weather Service just upgraded the storm. We are officially in a level 2 snow warning. They're predicting heavy accumulation in the passes by 6 p.m. Right when our guests are scheduled to arrive, I said. Are the ranch plows gassed up and ready? They are, but that's not the only storm. The phones are ringing off the hook. Pastor Ruth's line is jammed. The town is talking. Talking about what? Rumors, Lauren. They're spreading fast. That you're doing this to shame your family. That you're some coastal billionaire pulling a PR stunt. That this is all performative. Performative. I looked at the 10 industrial smokers working in a blizzard. I looked at Margaret, who had not sat down in 8 hours. I looked at the 500 pounds of potatoes waiting to be mashed. What's our official response? Maya asked, her voice tight. We don't have one. What? We are a logistics operation. Maya, we are not a marketing department. We have a mission. 200 hot meals for anyone who shows up. The rumors are noise. The storm is the signal. Focus on the signal. I looked out the window. The snow was coming down thick and horizontal now. Boost the generator output, I commanded. I want full power, not economy mode. That storm is going to take the grid down by sunset. I want the heated cables on the walkway turned to high, and open the emergency reserve closet. I want every blanket we own, every single one, stacked by the fireplace. If those roads close, our guests are staying the night. Yes, boss. Let them talk, I muttered to myself. We have work to do. My family operates on words. Full, convenient. Next year, they use words as walls. I operate on action, on systems, on proof. I walked over to the unseen chair, the single, heavy oak chair I had placed by the fire. It sat empty, waiting. It was the ghost of the card table. It was the seat for the overflow. I pulled a small, thick card from my pocket, one of the blank menu cards. I found a pen. I wrote 7 words on it. If you were ever turned away, this seat is yours. I bent down and pinned the card to the underside of the seat, where no one would see it but me, a private contract. I stood up and checked my watch. 3:50 p.m. Outside, the world was white. The string lights lining the driveway were fuzzy, indistinct halos. And then I heard it, the deep rumble of the first shuttle, our ranch plow clearing a path just ahead of it, making its way up the canyon. They were here. I put my headset back on. I took my place at the head of the serving line, grabbing a pair of heavy tongs for the turkey. Maya, I said, my voice clear and strong, broadcasting to every volunteer in the hall. The storm is here. So are our guests. I looked up at the massive, carved sign above the roaring fire, for the one who felt unseen. Open the doors. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the storm swept in. For a second, the great hall was a vortex of blowing snow and frigid air, the roar of the wind momentarily drowning out the fiddle music. The string lights on the porch were flickering, encased in ice. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. He was older, wearing a thin, worn-out Vietnam veteran's jacket. He stamped his feet on the welcome mat, knocking off snow. But he did not step inside. He just stood on the threshold, his shoulders hunched, looking in at the wall of light and heat and people. He looked at the 2 massive, 200-foot-long tables, already filling. He looked at the fireplace, tall as a truck. He looked terrified. I left the serving line, wiping my hands on my apron, and walked to the door. He flinched when he saw me approach. Ma'am, he said, his voice rough. I think I'm in the wrong place, the radio said. But this, he gestured at the hall. This is fancy. This is Starlight Basin, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, pitching it under the music. Are you here for the open table? He nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'm Frank. The VFW post sent me, but I stepped aside, holding the door open wider, letting the warm, savory air wash over him. There's no wrong place tonight. Frank, welcome home. His head snapped up. His eyes, watery and blue, met mine. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. He took one step, then another, crossing the threshold from the storm into the warmth. I took his frozen jacket from his shoulders. There's hot cider on the fire. Find any seat you like. He was the first drop. The rain came after. The next shuttle arrived, and it was full. 2 women, still in their blue scrubs from the night shift at the clinic, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. A long-haul trucker, his beard rimmed with ice, who just stared at the carving over the fire. An elderly couple, the husband holding his wife's elbow, moving slowly, their faces bewildered by the scale of the kindness. Then, a ranch truck full of seasonal farm workers. A group of 7 young men who clustered by the door, speaking softly in Spanish. Until Maria, Tom's wife, went over and greeted them, guiding them toward the food. One of Tom's sons, the one who wasn't helping plow, had taken out a fiddle. His friend had a guitar. They sat on stools near the hearth, not on a stage, just part of the room, playing old, familiar folk tunes. The music was a living thread that wove through the clatter of plates and the rising murmur of conversation. Near them, on the stone hearth, a group of children who had come with their parents were sitting on the floor, cutting maple leaves out of colored paper. Their laughter was high and bright. The food was not just plentiful, it was beautiful. Margaret Shaw had insisted. The 40 pumpkin pies were lined up on a side table, a row of bright orange suns against the snowy darkness outside. The mashed potatoes were in vast, steaming bowls, with pools of melted butter. The turkeys, smoked for 10 hours, were carved and plated, the meat glistening. I watched Frank. He sat down at the end of the first table, alone for a moment. A volunteer immediately brought him a heavy plate, loaded with everything. He just looked at it. He picked up his fork and put it down again. One of the nurses from the clinic, the one named Elena, slid into the seat across from him. "Looks good, doesn't it?" she said, setting down her own plate. Frank looked up, startled. Yes, ma'am." "Tough night to be out," she said. He nodded, and his voice was so low I almost missed it. I haven't had Thanksgiving with another person in almost 10 years. Not since my wife passed." Elena stopped, her fork halfway to her mouth. I eat a sandwich," he whispered, his eyes on his plate. "In my apartment, I watch the game. It's just easier." Elena reached across the table and put her hand over his. The man next to her had overheard. He raised his glass of cider. "Well, you're with us tonight, Frank." The woman next to him raised hers. To Frank. Slowly, all down the table, people raised their glasses. The conversation died down. The musicians softened their playing. Frank looked up, his face stricken, as 200 people, strangers, held up their mugs to him. Someone started to clap, not aloud, raucous applause. It was a soft, rolling wave of warmth. It was the sound of recognition. Frank's face crumpled. He hit it with his hand, but his shoulders shook. Elena just kept her hand on his, rubbing it gently. The gratitude board was filling up. The chalk was worn down to nubs. "Thank you for remembering us. My truck broke down. I was stranded. Now I'm here. Thank you for remembering me tonight. I am thankful for the heat. I am thankful for the mashed potatoes. I am thankful for Frank." Phones were out. People were taking pictures. But they were not taking pictures of themselves. Not selfies against the fireplace. They were taking pictures of the tables, of the sign, of the pies. They were documenting it, as if they needed proof that this moment, this refuge, was real. Maya showed me her phone. The local hashtag, Open Table White Hollow, was spreading across the county. It was not a PR stunt. It was a beacon. It was people checking in, telling their friends. It's real. It's warm. Come. By the main door, we had set out an old glass jar with a handwritten label. Coffee Fund. It was for the volunteers. I had put $100 in it to start. I watched as the trucker, the one with the icy beard, went to leave. He stopped at the jar. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $50 gas card. He dropped it in. The elderly couple, on their way out, slipped in a crumpled $20 bill. One by one, the people who had just been fed a free 5-star meal were quietly contributing. They were not paying for their dinner. They were paying it forward. They were becoming part of the system. I stepped back from the serving line for a moment, letting a volunteer take my place with the tongs. I walked to the end of the great hall, standing in the shadows by the tall, frosted windows. The snow was a solid, impenetrable wall of white outside. The wind howled, a high, lonely sound. But inside, the 2 long tables were full. Every seat was taken. People were laughing, talking, sharing plates. The music was bright. The fire was a roaring column of orange. The kids were now taping their paper leaves to the stone chimney. This was the scene I had always wanted. A full table, a house overflowing with light and sound. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a seat at a table for 14 people who did not want me. I had just built one for 200 who did. The pain that had been a cold, hard knot in my chest for 24 hours. It did not disappear, but it changed. It was not a wound anymore. It was fuel. The musicians swung into a familiar song, one everyone knew. A few voices started to sing along, then a few more. Within a minute, the whole hall was singing. A rough but heartfelt harmony that vibrated in my bones. Frank was singing, his face streaked with tears, but smiling. Elena was singing. The farm workers were clapping along, smiling, even if they did not know the words. I leaned against the cold glass of the window, the warmth of the room at my back, and just watched. I watched the family I had built in less than a day. Margaret Shaw came and stood beside me, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's a hell of a thing you did, kid," she said quietly. "We did," I corrected her. "We all did." "You drew the map," she said. "They just followed it." The song ended, and people cheered. It was time for dessert. "Right," I said, pushing off the window. "Let's get the pies out." As the night wound down, we switched from coffee to hot cocoa. We had giant vats of it, thick and dark, with marshmallows. As the shuttles began the slow, careful work of taking people back down the canyon road, we handed each person a heavy, insulated paper cup. "Take one for the cold drive home," I said, handing a cup to the elderly woman. She smiled, her gloved hands wrapping around the heat. "God bless you, dear. You're a light in the storm." I watched her go, and turned back to the warmth. The storm was still raging, but in here, we were safe. The day after Thanksgiving was always the quietest. The storm had broken, leaving the world muffled under 2 feet of fresh, pristine snow. The sky was a brilliant, painful blue. The Starlight Basin Hall was silent, save for the hum of the industrial dishwashers and the quiet murmur of the volunteer cleanup crew. It was a good mess, a mess of empty pie tins, stacked plates, and hundreds of glasses. Boots were drying by the fireplace, which still pulsed with a low, warm heat. I was in my office, mainlining coffee, running on fumes and a strange, quiet satisfaction. I had been reviewing the footage from the overhead cameras, not the clip of Frank, but the logistical feed, the flow of people, the efficiency of the serving lines, analyzing the bottlenecks. My phone, sitting on the desk, suddenly vibrated, not a text, a full-on, ringing call. The screen lit up. Gareth Vale. My father. I stared at it. I had not spoken to him, really spoken, in over a year. I considered letting it go to voicemail. No, I was a CEO. I did not avoid difficult calls. I took a breath, centered myself, and hit the green icon. "Hello, Dad?" A beat of silence. Then his voice, not yelling, but worse, cold, tight, and steeped in a fury I knew well. It was the voice of absolute patriarchal disappointment. "Lauren, what in God's name did you think you were doing?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the endless, clean snow. "I was making dinner." "Do not be glib," he snapped. "You have embarrassed this entire family. You made us a laughingstock. We have been fielding calls all morning. All morning. You made us look like monsters." Before I could frame a response, a new voice broke in, high-pitched and frantic. My mother, Lydia. They had me on speakerphone. "People think we abandoned you. They think we just left you out in the cold. Pastor Ruth called. Your Aunt Clara called. How could you put us in this position? Lauren, how could you be so cruel?" I was cruel. The accusation was so absurd, so perfectly inverted. I almost laughed. "I didn't put you in any position," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the air outside. "I simply—" "Oh, stop it." The voice was sharp, cutting, and full of the old familiar jealousy. Marin, my sister, the queen, dragged from her throne. "You always do this. You cannot just be ignored, can you? You have to turn everything into a spectacle. You had to go buy a $5 million ranch and throw this pity party for a bunch of strangers just to make us look bad. You always have to show off." Show off. The words hung in the air. They saw my life, my work, the ranch, not as something I had built, but as a weapon I had forged specifically to aim at them. I let the silence sit for a moment. I let their accusations echo. They had built their case. Now it was my turn. "I didn't show off," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I received a piece of data. The data I received, from Dad, was that Thanksgiving was full. I am a logistics expert. I saw an unmet need, so I just filled the empty space." The silence that followed was total. It was the sound of 3 people who had prepared for a screaming match, for tears, for apologies. They had not prepared for facts. Marin was the first to recover, her voice sputtering. You're twisting his words. That's not what he meant." "Enough." The new voice was a roar, crackling over the speakerphone. A voice I had not heard in months, a voice that was not supposed to be in that room. "Aunt June?" I asked, sitting forward. "Yes, it's June," she snapped. "I'm here. I came over to this house to tell your parents to their faces what cowards they are, and I walk into this ambush. Enough, Lydia. Enough, Gareth." "June, this is a private family matter," my mother said, her voice a trembling whisper. "It stopped being private when you uninvited your daughter to Thanksgiving so your son-in-law could suck up to his bosses." Aunt June was on a roll, and the sound was magnificent. "It stopped being private when you told me I was not welcome because I dared to defend her. You think she's showing off? I was there, Lydia. I was there for 10 straight years, watching you stick that brilliant girl at a folding card table in the hallway. 10 years. While Marin and her little debate friends sat at the good table. Did you think she would forget? Did you think she would not eventually go out and build her own table? You're not embarrassed. Gareth, you're exposed." Absolute, crushing silence. I could hear someone's breathing, shallow and wet. My mother. "You are out of line, June," my father finally said, his voice weak. "No, Gareth, you sent the text. You told her she wasn't welcome. You started this. She just finished it, and she did it by feeding half the county. My God, the one decent thing this family has produced, and you tried to throw it in the trash." I said nothing. I just listened. This was the testimony I had waited my entire life to hear. I did not have to defend myself. The truth was finally standing up on its own. "Lauren," my mother whispered, her voice broken, You should have just called. You should have just come home anyway. You know, we always. The message was clear, I interrupted, my voice devoid of emotion. Full is full. I accepted the terms. There was a sharp click. Marin had hung up. Another second, and the line went dead. My father. I set the phone down on the desk. My hand was shaking, not from fear, not from anger. It was the last of the adrenaline, the final tremor of a tectonic plate settling into a new position. My laptop pinged. It was an email from Maya, who was coordinating cleanup. Subject: You need to see this. She had attached 2 links. The first was a video, uploaded to the county's public social media forum. It was filmed on a shaky phone. From inside the hall, it was Frank. He was standing, his face streaked with tears, his hand holding up a glass of cider. 10 years, he was saying, his voice cracking but carrying. 10 years, I've been eating a sandwich alone on this day. Tonight I'm with family. To everyone who did this. To the woman who... Thank you. This is what it means. This is Thanksgiving. The camera panned, and I saw the whole hall, 200 people, all on their feet, all raising their glasses, a wave of applause that was more like a roar of pure, unadulterated gratitude. My breath hitched. The second link was to the White Hollow Gazette, the local paper, the front page story, posted online an hour ago, had already been shared hundreds of times. The headline was simple, brutal, and perfect. When her family's door closed, she built a hall. My family had not called because I embarrassed them. They had called because I had been seen. The story was out, and for the first time in my life, they were not the ones writing it. My phone buzzed again. An email. This one was not from Maya. It was from the official compliance inbox for Starlight Basin. The subject line: Official notification. County Health Department complaint. I opened it. My blood went cold. It was a formal notification. An anonymous complaint had been filed against the ranch. I read the charges. Potential food safety violations. Uncertified kitchen staff. Operation during an extreme weather event. Overcrowding. And unverified auxiliary power sources. They were sending an inspector. Today. Anonymous. This was not a rumor. This was not a mean comment. This was a targeted, professional attack. This was designed to shut me down, to fine me, to declare the ranch unsafe, to poison the single good thing I had built. This was not my father's clumsy anger. This was not my mother's tearful manipulation. This was Marin, or more accurately, this was her husband's law firm, Vale and Northbridge. This was regulatory warfare. They could not win the public opinion battle. The Frank video, the headline, they were losing. So they were changing the battlefield. They were moving it from the court of public opinion to an actual court. They were trying to bury me in paperwork, in violations, in fines. They were attacking my credibility. They thought I was just a rich girl playing party planner. They thought I was sloppy. They had forgotten what I do for a living. I opened my laptop and connected to the Hearthway secure server. I pulled up the Starlight Basin compliance folder. I started making a new file. Tab 1. Temporary food service permit. Filed and approved. Wednesday. 10:03 a.m. Tab 2. Catering certification for Margaret Shaw. Active. Tab 3. Full temperature logs from all 10 smokers and the mobile cold storage unit. Uploaded every 15 minutes. Time-stamped. Every turkey. Every potato. Documented from delivery to plate. Tab 4. Generator load test certificates. All 3 units. Signed off by the county electrician 2 months ago. Tab 5. Stamped architectural plans. Maximum capacity for the Great Hall. 350. We had 200. File 6. Evacuation routes and fire suppression system schematics. Approved. Maya sent one more message. It was a trace on the IP address of the anonymous electronic filing. It was routed through a dozen shell servers. But the origin node? A server block registered to Vale and Northbridge. I saved the screenshot. I compiled everything into a single, password-protected file. I looked at the health department email again. They're sending an inspector. Today, I took a long, slow sip of my now cold coffee, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. They want to do this by the book. They have no idea I wrote it. The inspector's truck was a white county-issue Ford, and it sliced through the new snow in the driveway with an aggressive, official purpose. He was alone, a man in his 50s, with a clipboard and an expression that suggested he had missed his own quiet, post-Thanksgiving morning for this. His name was Davies. He entered the great hall without wiping his feet, his eyes scanning the room. The last of the volunteers were sweeping, mopping, and packing away the industrial-grade dishware. The hall still smelled faintly of sage and smoke. "Lauren Vale?" he asked. His voice was flat. "I am," I said, walking over. I had my tablet in my hand, already open to the compliance folder. "I'm here from the County Health and Safety Department. We've received a significant, anonymous complaint regarding your event yesterday. I was notified," I said. "How can I help you?" Sheriff Collins entered the hall quietly behind him. "Mr. Davies, just here to observe." Davies shot Collins an annoyed look, then returned to his clipboard. He was performing. "The allegations are serious. Ms. Vale, 1. Reckless overcrowding, far exceeding the stated capacity of this structure." I did not say a word. I simply turned the screen of my tablet toward him. On it was the scanned, stamped, and approved architectural plan from the county itself. I tapped the capacity line. Maximum capacity, 350 persons. As per your own office, we had 200 guests, in shifts. At no point did we exceed 220, including volunteers. His eyes narrowed. He made a small check mark. Allegation 2. Improper food handling. Use of uncertified staff. Unsafe preparation. Something about outdoor smokers. "My temporary food service permit," I said, tapping the next file. "Filed and approved Wednesday morning. Here is the active catering certification for my head chef, Margaret Shaw. And here," I swiped again, "are the complete time-stamped temperature logs from all 10 smokers, cross-referenced with internal meat temperatures, and the real-time feed from the mobile cold storage unit. As you can see, nothing ever dropped below 140 degrees, and our cold storage never rose above 38. Davies stared at the scrolling graphs. He was not expecting data. He was expecting a flustered rich girl. "I see," he said. His voice clipped. "Allegation 3, he continued, clearly moving to the one he thought would stick. "Failure of infrastructure. The complaint states you were operating on unverified, and I quote, dangerous and untested auxiliary power sources during a severe weather event." He looked around the hall. "The lights are on. You're on the grid now. But yesterday?" "We were," I said. "And we are now. The grid is stable. For the moment. And these generators? Are they certified for this kind of load?" "They are," I said. "But you should not take my word for it." I nodded to Tom, who was standing by the main engineering panel, waiting. "Tom, let's show Mr. Davies." I led the inspector to the utility shed, a small, soundproofed concrete building 50 yards from the hall. Tom opened the doors. Inside were not 1, but 3, massive diesel generators, humming in perfect, load-balanced synchronization. "These are medical grade, Mr. Davies," I said. "The same ones Hearthway installs for rural hospitals. Tom, initiate a full load stress test. And please," I said, turning back to Davies, "let's go back inside. It's cold out here." When we re-entered the great hall, I tapped my tablet, the massive 12-foot projector screen, usually reserved for wedding slideshows, descended from the ceiling. A moment later, a complex dashboard lit up the screen. It was the live feed from the generator shed. It showed the load, the fuel consumption, the output, and the building's entire thermal map. "As you can see," I said, as the volunteers stopped mopping to watch, "the stress test is initiating. The generators are now powering not only this hall, but the heated walkways and the stable block. They are operating at 40% of their maximum capacity. Every sensor in this building is green. We could power this entire ranch, and probably half of White Hollow. For the next 48 hours before refueling. Davies was silent. He just stared at the screen, at the undeniable, real-time proof. Sheriff Collins stepped forward, pulling out his own notebook. "Mr. Davies?" he said, his voice casual. "I did a little digging on that anonymous complaint. It was filed electronically at 11:04 p.m. last night, from an IP address block registered to the law firm of Vale and Northbridge, over in Bozeman." The color drained from the inspector's face. He knew that name. Everyone knew that name. "I'm just noting," Collins continued, writing in his pad, "a potential and significant conflict of interest. Seeing as Vale is Ms. Vale's sister, Marin, seems this might be less about public safety and more about a family disagreement. Wasting county resources on something like that is unfortunate." Davies's face hardened. He was not angry at me anymore. He was angry at being used, at being made to look like a fool. He snapped his clipboard shut. He took out his pen, and on the main inspection form, he pressed hard, scrawling a single word. He tore the sheet off and handed it to me. "You're in compliance, Ms. Vale. No violations." He turned and walked out of the hall, not bothering to look back. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the generators. Then, Margaret Shaw started to clap. The other volunteers joined in. A wave of cheers and relieved laughter. We had won. They had come at us with lawyers and regulations, and we had beaten them with data and preparation. The celebration lasted less than a minute. Maya's tablet, the one synced to the National Weather Service, emitted a high, piercing alarm. We all froze. "Lauren," she said, her voice tight, "the storm, it's just stalled over the pass. It's intensifying. They've upgraded it. It's a level 3, a full-blown blizzard. They're closing all mountain passes. No one in, no one out." As if the weather report itself had cut the lines. The main lights in the great hall flickered. They went out. The music from the speakers died. The dishwashers in the kitchen whined to a stop. The hall was plunged into a sudden, deep silence, a collective gasp, and then, thrum, a deep, resonant hum. The transfer was instantaneous. The lights came back on, not flickering, but burning with a pure, steady, white light. The hum of the generators was the only sound, a reassuring heartbeat. We were off the grid. We were an island. Sheriff Collins's radio exploded with static. "Dispatch to Collins. We have a code red. A White Hollow charter bus. It tried to beat the closure over Miller's Pass. It's in a drift. It's buried. 22 passengers, including children. We can't get the plows to them. The drift is too deep and unstable." The sheriff looked at me, his face grim. "They're 5 miles from your gate, Miss Vale." "But it's 5 miles of hell." "You can't reach them," I said. It was not a question. "Your heavy vehicles can't get traction. We're trying to organize a snowmobile team from town, but—" "You don't have time," I said. I was already moving, my headset on. "Tom, get the snowmobiles. All 6 of them. Get them fueled. I want the 4x4 pickups, the ones with the winches, lined up at the gate. Load them with every blanket we stacked. Every single one." I ran to my office, my volunteers watching me, their expressions shifting from relief to a new, focused tension. I threw open my laptop and booted a program. Hearthway Field, the lightweight, rapid response version of my logistics platform, designed for disaster zones. "Maya," I yelled, "tell Margaret to get those vats of soup back on. Hot, high calorie, and all the cocoa. Elena, I need that first aid station turned into a full-scale triage. We're going to have hypothermia cases." Collins was at my shoulder. "What are you doing?" "I'm routing," I said, my fingers flying. The map of the pass appeared. I saw the bus's location, pinged by dispatch. I saw the terrain. "Your plows can't make it, but a coordinated chain can. I'm establishing a new supply line." I turned to the volunteers. "This isn't a cleanup anymore. This is a rescue." I pointed to the map on my screen. "Tom, you lead the snowmobiles. You are the last mile." You will ferry passengers, 2 at a time, from the bus to the rendezvous point at the base of the pass. The pickups will be waiting. Hearthway Field will coordinate your movements. 1 in, 1 out, no one gets lost, no one is left behind. The Great Hall, which had been a place of celebration, and then a place of legal defense, transformed a third time. The remaining tables were cleared and stacked. The emergency cots I'd stored in the attic were brought down and lined up in rows near the fireplace. The bar was converted into a charging station, a web of power strips running directly from the generator feed. The open table is now rescue base, I said into the headset, my voice ringing out through the hall. We have 22 people trapped in the dark. We are the only light, the volunteers. The same people who had been sweeping were now making beds, refilling urns, and stacking medical supplies. No one left. No one even looked at the door. The community that had gathered to be fed was now staying to feed others. I pulled on my heavy-duty parka. Tom, I'm riding with you on the first run. No, boss. It's 2. I know the route, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. And I know my system. Let's go get them. The wind didn't howl. It screamed. It was a solid, moving thing. A wall of ice and noise that hit the snowmobile and tried to tear me from the seat. I kept my head down, my goggles caked in frost, following the infrared dot of Tom's taillight. My company was built on data, on predicting chaos, but this was not a simulation. This was a physical, brutal equation of cold, time, and human life. We made the 5-mile run to the rendezvous point in 20-minute cycles. Tom and his team handled the extraction, pulling people from the buried bus and loading them onto the back of the snowmobiles. I managed the transfer, the cold chain of human beings, getting them from the snowmobiles into the waiting, idling ranch trucks. Their faces were all the same, masks of shock, white with cold, their eyes wide and vacant. We brought them back in groups of 4. When the first truck rolled up to the Great Hall, the doors were thrown open, the wave of heat, light, and the smell of hot soup hit us first. Elena, the nursing student, was at the door. She was no longer a volunteer. She was in charge. This way, she commanded, her voice sharp. Triage by the fire. Shock and hypothermia first. The volunteers, the same people who had come for a meal, formed a human chain, helping the dazed passengers out of the truck. They were wrapped in the emergency blankets, guided to the rows of cots that now filled the hall. Margaret Shaw, the 70-year-old chef, was ladling 3 a.m. soup into mugs. It was a thick, scalding broth of potatoes, carrots, and the last of the smoked turkey, loaded with calories. Get this into them, she ordered. Now, before they even sit. We had saved the bus, 22 people, but as the last passenger was brought in, Sheriff Collins's radio crackled again. The blizzard had knocked out the town's main power grid. The entire valley, save for my generators, was dark. The phone lines at the ranch, now patched into the satellite, began to ring. People were trapped in their homes, an elderly couple in the low valley, their furnace dead, a family with a newborn, their electric heat gone. The storm was no longer just an obstacle. It was a siege. Frank, the veteran, who had been quietly directing people to cots, came to me. His eyes were clear, the haunted look from the night before replaced by a tactical fire. Ma'am, he said, and he called me ma'am, but he spoke as an equal. Collins and his deputies are spread thin. The official plows are stuck, but me and that long-haul trucker, we know these roads. We know where the drifts are. We can get to those folks in the valley if we take your trucks. They're yours, I said without hesitation. He nodded once. We need blankets and hot food, thermoses. Take them all, I said. Frank turned and grabbed the trucker. We're a convoy, he said. And just like that, a new rescue operation was born, led by the very people we had first welcomed. The Great Hall became a living organism. Outside, the ice caked the porch lights, turning them into blurred, frozen stars. The wind hammered the walls, but inside, there was a strange, focused peace. In one corner, Elena had created a monitoring station. She was checking blood pressure, using a portable pulse oximeter, and checking the blood sugar of the diabetic passenger. His name was Mr. Henderson, and he was watching her with a dazed gratitude. One of the university students who had come for the meal, the one with the guitar, had moved near the cots where the children were. He was not playing the loud, festive songs from the night before. He was softly picking out lullabies, his music a gentle counter-rhythm to the roar of the storm. I walked the rows. I was not a host. I was on patrol. I saw a young girl, one of the bus passengers, shivering in her sleep. I found one of the wool blankets from the reserve and tucked it around her. I saw an empty mug by a cot and refilled it with hot water. I did not take pictures. I did not make announcements. I just moved, checking systems, managing the logistics of human warmth. A side door, the one near the kitchens, opened in a gust of snow. A figure slipped in, stomping his boots, his arms loaded with 2 heavy canvas bags. It was Cal. He looked exhausted, and his face was a mixture of fear and a new, defiant anger. He found me by the backup generators. "Lauren," he said, his voice low. "Cal, what are you doing here? The pass is closed." "I came before it shut. I've been stuck in town, at a diner, listening." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. They're furious. Lauren, Mom, Dad, they saw the news. They're calling it an attack. And Marin," he shook his head. "She's gone. I've never seen her like this. She said you did this to destroy her." "I did this to feed people," I said, my voice flat. "I know," he said, and his voice broke. "I know. That's why I'm here." He dropped the heavy bags at my feet. I looked inside. 3 new electric kettles, and at least a dozen high-capacity power banks. It's all I could think of. From the house. They won't even notice. He looked around the hall, at the rows of sleeping people, at the nurses, at the children. This is right. He met my gaze, and I saw my little brother, the one who always hid, finally make a choice. "You didn't see me here," he whispered. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Thank you. Cal, go. Be safe." He nodded, turned, and slipped back out into the storm. I took the kettles and power banks to Elena's station. She looked at them like they were gold. The group of teenagers who had been cutting paper leaves the night before were huddled near the gratitude board. They had found the chalk. They were making a new sign. On a fresh piece of plywood, in big clear letters, they wrote, "If your house is full, ours is open." They propped it up by the door, a new welcome for the next wave of rescues. Pastor Ruth found me. She was holding a sleeping child, rocking her gently. She watched me check the fuel logs for the generators. "Lauren," she whispered. I looked up, my mind still on burn rates and wattage. "I've been preaching about ministry for 30 years, she said, her eyes shining. "About what it means to serve. I always thought it was about words, about faith." She looked around the warm, bright, noisy room. You just redefined it. This is ministry. It's logistics, it's fuel, it's a hot bowl of soup at 3 a.m. I gave her a tired smile and went to check on the kitchen. Someone had taped a piece of paper to the gleaming metal door of the mobile cold storage unit. It was a thank you note. "To the ranch. Our power went out at midnight. My son is a type 1 diabetic. All his insulin was in our fridge. We thought it would freeze. We heard you had power. We brought it here. Your kitchen staff put it in this machine. You saved his life. Thank you." The system I had built to protect potato salad had saved a child's insulin. I leaned against the wall, the exhaustion hitting me for the first time. I looked over at the unseen chair, the one I had set by the fire. It was no longer empty. A ranch hand, one of Tom's, was asleep in it, his boots covered in snow, his head on his chest. He looked peaceful. I walked over, The small card I had pinned underneath it was gone. In its place, tucked into the armrest, was a folded napkin. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky. I sat here and was not invisible. Frank! The local news station, running on its own generator, had picked up the story. They were patched into a shaky live stream from one of the volunteers' phones, miles away, in her silent, perfect, showcase home. Marin Vale watched it. She watched the sign being painted. She watched the rows of cots. She watched Frank, the veteran, directing his rescue team, his voice full of purpose. And then the camera panned. She saw Cal, her brother, her ally. He was kneeling by a cot, talking to the elderly woman Frank's team had just brought in. He was gently chafing her hands, handing her a steaming mug. He looked up, and his face was clear. He was not hiding. He was proud. Marin's hand, holding a wine glass, tightened. Her knuckles went white. Her expression, so certain and so cold, wavered. It was a single, tiny tremor, a fault line. The sky in the east began to lighten. From black to a deep, bruised purple, the wind died down, the snow stopped. The hall was quiet, filled with the sound of breathing. We had made it through the night. I stood at the window, watching the first light hit the impossible, clean white of the valley. The storm was over, but I knew. From the rage in Cal's report, from the hard line of Marin's mouth, I could so clearly imagine that another one was just beginning. By 7 a.m. the following morning, the sun was high and brutal, reflecting off the 2 feet of fresh snow with a blinding white light. The Great Hall was a triage center in recovery. The passengers from the bus, the elderly from the valley, all were safe, warm, and fed. They were drinking the last of the coffee, their faces tired but alive. Elena was taking final notes. Frank was helping Sheriff Collins coordinate with the county plows, which were finally breaking through. A black, immaculate luxury sedan, the kind that never sees a gravel road, appeared in the driveway. It was aggressively clean against the backdrop of our snow-covered rescue vehicles. It looked like a panther, sleek and predatory. The doors opened. My father, Gareth, in a cashmere overcoat. My mother, Lydia, wrapped in fur, her face pale. And Marin, she was not dressed for a disaster zone. She was dressed for war. She wore sharp, heeled boots, a black wool coat, and her expression was a mask of rigid, controlled fury. She did not look at the rescued families on the porch. She did not look at the county plow. Her eyes found me, standing in the open doorway, and she strode forward, her heels punching holes in the packed snow. "You," she hissed. Her voice was low, for my ears only. "You did this. You planned this." "Good morning, Marin. You will take it down," she demanded. "Take what down?" "Do not play dumb with me, Lauren. The video, the articles, that man crying," she gestured, a flick of her leather-gloved hand. "You staged this entire, pathetic opera to slander us. You are going to make a public statement, and you are going to take it all down, now." "I don't think I can do that," I said. "You will," she snapped, taking a step closer. My father and mother stood behind her, silent, looking anywhere but at the crowd of people on the porch. "Folks," a new voice said. Sheriff Collins stepped out of the hall, putting himself between me and my sister. He was holding a steaming mug. "This is still an active recovery area, but please, come on in. It's warm inside. This is a private family matter." "Sheriff," my father said, finding his voice. "Sir, your daughter's private family matter has been broadcast on every local station for 12 hours, Collins said, his voice flat. "Your private matter involved a false report to the health department, which I'm investigating, and this," he said, gesturing to the hall behind him, "is the community you involved. So, no, it's not private anymore. Come on in." He did not wait for an answer. He held the door open. Marin, her face white with rage, strode past him. My parents, trapped, followed. The great hall went quiet. The 20 rescued passengers, the dozen volunteers, Margaret, Elena, Frank, they all stopped. They turned. My family stood in the center of the room, an island of expensive wool and cold anger, surrounded by a sea of rumpled blankets, sleeping cots, and tired, grateful people. Pastor Ruth, who had been sitting with the elderly couple, stood up. She walked toward my parents, her face filled with a deep, profound sadness. "Gareth, Lydia," she said softly, "welcome. We were just saying a prayer of thanks." My mother flinched. "We are in a place of rescue," Pastor Ruth continued, her voice gaining strength, echoing in the quiet hall. "A place where the truth was a matter of life and death all night. Perhaps this is the best place to finally tell it." Marin scoffed. "We're not on trial, Pastor." "Aren't you?" I said. I walked past them to the projector I had used for the inspector. I powered it on. The giant, 12-foot screen whirred to life. "You came here to demand I take things down," I said to Marin. "You accuse me of slander, but you forgot. I'm not a publicist. Marin, I'm a logistician. I only deal with data." I hit the first button, projected on the screen, for the entire room to see, was the screenshot of my phone, the single, blue text bubble. "Thanksgiving is full. Next year." "This," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "is the 8-word text I received from my father. This is the piece of data that started this." My father stared at it, his own words magnified, looking like a betrayal. My mother closed her eyes. "But full was a lie," I continued. "I found that out, so I wondered, why? Why lie so clumsily?" I hit the next button. The anonymous health complaint appeared on the screen. The list of charges: overcrowding, unsafe food, dangerous generators. Then this arrived, I said. An attempt to shut me down, to declare this place a public hazard. An attack not just on me, but on everyone who came here for help. "You can't prove that was us," Marin snapped. I hit the third button, the IP trace, the server block registration, the 2 names, Vale and Northbridge, Marin's husband. The blood drained from her face. My mother let out a small, strangled sound. "This was not slander," I said, turning to face her. "This was a coordinated, illegal attack. You used your husband's law firm to file a false report. You tried to shut down a rescue operation. During a blizzard." "No!" Marin cried. The sound ripped from her. "No! We filed it before the storm got bad. We didn't know about the bus." She was crumbling. The mask of fury was cracking, revealing the raw panic underneath. "He did it to protect us," she yelled, her voice breaking. "He did it to protect our honor. You were making us look like monsters, all over the internet. You bought a $5 million ranch just to humiliate us." "Humiliate you?" my mother whispered, her face ashen. "Lauren, we just wanted a simple Thanksgiving. It was just simpler." "Simpler?" A new voice, sharp and clear. Aunt June. She had been sitting on one of the cots, talking to a family. She stood up and walked forward. "Simpler than what, Lydia?" Aunt June demanded, fixing my mother with a look of pure fire. "Simpler than inviting your own daughter? I've been silent for a decade. I am done." She turned to the room, to Frank, to Pastor Ruth. "You want to know about simple? I'll tell you. For 10 years, I came to this family's perfect Thanksgiving, and for 10 years, I watched them put this girl," she pointed to me, "at a folding card table in the hallway, a flimsy, metal-legged card table, every year, until she was 18, while her daughter," she pointed to Marin, "sat at the main table, praised and perfect. That's your simple, Lydia. That's your honor, Gareth. You didn't just exclude her this year. You've been doing it her entire life." A collective, horrified silence. The rescued passengers, the volunteers, They were not just witnesses, they were a jury. "It's true," a voice said. We all turned. Cal. He had been by the coffee urn, his face hidden. He stepped forward. His hands were shaking, but his voice was loud. For the first time, it was loud. "It's true," he said again, looking at my father. "All of it. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of pretending she doesn't exist. I'm tired of having to choose. I'm tired of you acting like Marin is the only one who matters." My father looked at his son as if he were a stranger. Marin stared at Cal, her face a mask of betrayal. Then she turned back to me. All her defenses were gone, replaced by a raw, childish rage. She was crying, hot, angry tears. "You did this!" she screamed at me. "You planned all of it. The storm, the bus, all of it. Just to win. You've always been this way. Trying to beat me. You couldn't just have your money. You had to have this. You had to make them love you. You did all this just to win." "Win?" A new voice, low, gravelly, frank. He stood up from his cot, his blanket falling from his shoulders. He was old, and he was tired. But he stood as tall as the fireplace. He walked slowly, deliberately, until he was standing in front of my sister. "You think this was a competition?" he asked, his voice shaking with a quiet, powerful anger. "I sat in my apartment for 10 years, ma'am, alone. On Thanksgiving, I ate a sandwich. I waited for the day to be over. On Thursday, this young woman, she didn't just give me a meal. She gave me a place. She saved me from being alone." He turned to the rest of the room. "She saved all of us. When the power went out, her generators were on. When the bus was in the snow, her team went out. When my neighbors were freezing, her trucks brought them here. This wasn't a competition. This was a rescue." The air was thick. The only sound was my mother's quiet, choked sobs. My father looked at the floor. Marin just stared at Frank, her tears frozen on her face, utterly defeated. All eyes in the hall. The nurses, the truckers, the children, the pastor, the sheriff, were on my family. 3 people, exposed, shivering, in the center of the warmth. I walked over to the fireplace, the unseen chair, the one Frank had slept in, the one that had been my ghost. I grabbed it. It was heavy, made of solid oak. I dragged it across the floor, the sound echoing in the silent hall. I placed it in the empty space between me and my family. I looked at my father, at my mother, at my sister. "Marin said I did this to win," I said, my voice clear and final. "Frank said this was a rescue. He's right. It was. But it still is." I put my hand on the back of the empty chair. "I'm done with the card table," I said. "This is the only chair that matters now. It's for the one who felt unseen. It's for the one who was turned away. And it's for the one who is brave enough to sit down and admit they were wrong." I let go. The chair sat there, empty, a silent invitation, a final judgment. I waited. The silence in the great hall was absolute. It was not an empty silence. It was heavy, filled with the held breath of 50 people. My family stood in the center of the room, a stark, isolated island. My father, Gareth Vale, stared at the floor, his face gray. My mother, Lydia, was weeping, her fur coat looking absurd and tragic. Marin was trembling, her mask of righteous fury shattered, leaving only the raw, ugly face of her shame. The jury, the bus passengers, the rescued, the volunteers, just watched. My father was the first to move. He was a man who had commanded boardrooms, a man whose voice had defined my world. Now, he looked old. He took one step, then another, his expensive shoes silent on the stone floor. He walked past me, past his weeping wife, past his broken daughter. He walked to the single, empty oak chair I had dragged into the middle of the room. He did not sit immediately. He just looked at it. He looked at the heavy carved wood. He looked at the space it occupied. He finally looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "This," he said, his voice a dry whisper. "This was the card table." I just nodded. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and slowly, deliberately, he sat down in the unseen chair. He looked at his hands, twisting them in his lap. I let comfort blind me," he said, his voice so quiet the room had to strain to hear. "It was just easier to have things the way they were, to praise Marin, to let you be the capable one, the one who didn't need anything." He shook his head, a single, violent gesture of self-disgust. "It was lazy, it was cowardly, and it was cruel." He looked up, and his gaze was steady, his shame unhidden. "I am sorry, Lauren. I am so sorry. I didn't see you." My mother moved then, a choked sob escaping her. She stumbled forward and stood behind him, her hands hovering over his shoulders, afraid to touch him. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "We said full, Lauren, but the house has been empty for so long, even when we were all in it. I was a coward, too." She put her hands on his shoulders, clinging to him. "I didn't see you. I chose not to. And I want to learn how. Please, I want to learn how to see you." Marin stood alone, glaring at them, at me. She was a cornered animal. "So that's it?" she spat, her voice thick with tears. "You all apologize. And she wins? She gets everything? She gets to be the hero. She gets the ranch. And she gets you?" "Marin," Pastor Ruth said. Her voice was not sharp. It was gentle, but it cut through Marin's rage. She pointed, not at me, not at the chair. She pointed to the massive gratitude board by the door, still covered in chalk-written messages. "That board is for the truth," Pastor Ruth said. "Go write yours. Go write the one thing you are truly grateful for, in front of all of us." Marin stared at her, horrified. "I will not." "Then you are the only person in this room who has learned nothing," the pastor said quietly. It was a public test, a final, unbearable humiliation. Marin looked at the floor, at her parents, at the faces of the community watching her. Trapped, slowly. Her shoulders slumped. The fight went out of her. She walked to the blackboard, her heels clicking in the dead silence. She picked up a nub of chalk. Her hand was shaking. She stood there for a full minute, her back to us. We watched her write one, short, cramped line. She stepped back, but she did not turn around. I read it aloud for the room. "I am grateful. My sister did what I was too scared to." She let the chalk fall from her hand. It clattered on the floor. She did not walk back. She simply slid down the wall, hiding her face in her hands. And for the first time, her sobs were not of anger. They were of grief. She sat on the floor, accepting the gaze of the community, and let herself be broken. Sheriff Collins cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel. "Well," he said, pulling out his notebook. "My part in this is simple." He looked at my family, a long, appraising look. "The anonymous complaint, filed by Vale and Northbridge, given the testimony in this room and the clear lack of evidence, is dismissed." My father closed his eyes in relief. "However," the sheriff continued, and my father's eyes snapped open, "a new investigation is being opened into the filing of that complaint, using a law firm to file a false report, attempting to interfere with a public safety operation during a declared weather emergency. That is a felony. Mr. Vale, it is an abuse of public office. The county prosecutor will be in touch with your son-in-law." My father nodded, pale but resolute. He accepted it. Marin flinched, as if struck. The consequences were real. I looked at them, the Vale family, humbled, exposed, and exhausted on the floor of my hall. I felt no spike of triumph. Just the vast, quiet ache of a bone finally setting. I did not offer them a hand. I did not offer a hug. I walked back to the center of the room. "We have a new rule at this table," I said. My voice was clear. It was my kitchen command voice. I looked at Frank, at Margaret, at the volunteers who were watching, waiting. At this table, everyone clears their own mess. My gaze settled on my parents and my sister. That includes the apologies, and it includes the work. My father took a breath and, with the dignity of a man accepting a just sentence, he stood up from the unseen chair. He offered a hand to my mother. "Lydia," he said, "find a broom. Let's help clean up." As if that were the signal. The tension in the room finally broke. Margaret Shaw, bless her, emerged from the kitchen. She was carrying a tray of coffee mugs and a single bottle of champagne she must have found in the cellar. She poured a small amount into each mug. She handed one to me, she handed one to Frank, and one to Pastor Ruth. I held my mug up. The room quieted again. "To the ones," I said, my voice ringing, "who were always told the table was full, to the ones who stood outside the door, to the ones who felt unseen." I looked around the room, at the faces of the survivors, the rescuers, my family. This table is ours. "To this table," Frank said, his voice thick. "To this table." The room echoed. The guitarist, who had been sitting quietly, began to play. The same soft folk tune from the night before. The spell was broken. People started to move. The rescued began gathering their things. The volunteers started folding cots. My mother and father, awkwardly, began stacking blankets. Marin, her face tear-stained, quietly took an empty coffee mug from Mr. Henderson and carried it to the kitchen. It was not forgiveness. It was not a happy ending. It was just the start of the cleanup. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. A text from a number I did not recognize. The mayor of a neighboring town, 3 counties over. "Heard what you did at Starlight Basin. Our county shelter system is a mess. They say you built a full-scale operation in 24 hours. We want to learn your open table model. Can you advise?" I looked at the message. I looked at the hall. A functioning, beautiful, chaotic system of people helping people. I smiled. I typed one reply. "Send me your schedule." I put the phone in my back pocket. I walked back to the kitchen, where Margaret was already, just in case, stirring a new, massive pot of soup. I picked up a ladle. Frank was there, holding his empty mug, looking hopeful. "Just in time," I said. I served him a hot, fresh bowl. The overhead camera, the silent witness, began its final, slow pullback. It panned over the long tables, now being cleared by a strange, new, composite family of strangers and relatives. It passed over my parents, folding blankets, side by side. It passed over the volunteers, singing softly to the guitar. It settled, for a long moment, on the unseen chair, now back in its place of honor by the roaring fireplace. Empty, it held. 1 beat, 2, a new figure walked into the frame, a young woman, a backpacker. Her gear soaked from the melted snow. She looked cold, lost, and exhausted. She must have just heard the news in town. She saw the warm hall. She saw the fire. She saw the empty chair. She looked around, hesitant. Frank saw her. He did not get up. He just smiled and nodded toward the chair. She smiled back. A small, relieved smile. She dropped her heavy pack, walked over, and sank deep into the unseen chair, holding her frozen hands out to the flames. The fire crackled. The screen went to black. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Make sure you subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you can, please support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.